you out there without care. I was out of tune, but it wasn't because I didn't know. No, I just knew too much. Does that make me crazy? Does that make me crazy? Does that make me crazy? Possibly. I hope that you're having the time of your life. Think twice. That's my only advice. Oh, who do you think you are? Oh, bless your soul.
Hello, everybody. It's a beautiful Tuesday morning. Let's get into it. Guys, earlier today when I posted, I said I'm going to be on at 9:15. Some guy in the comment section said, Mr. Moyer, you better be on time because I've just now got into the office. So, guys, thank you for taking the time. I know it's early, and I know that this is during working hours, and that's fine, you know. Not everybody has to watch a live. You can watch it on the replay. It's fine, you know, if that interests you. But my point is, you know, we don't always have to be live. But I love the fact that I'm able to do that here in my office at Simoson. A few shout outs to you guys before I begin. As is my custom, I love to give you guys shout outs. I love it. I love to see your names on there. I love that you participate. And of course, we're trying to build a community here, which is what I think every responsible Facebook vlogger, Facebook podcaster, whatever you want to call it, I think each one of us has the responsibility to do that, to build a community. So I love to see you on there. Somebody's watching us from Livingston. Thank you, Livingston. Appreciate you. Somebody says, good morning. Hello, TC. Good morning to you. Morning. Thank you so much for being with me. Guys, let's get into it. I know this happened yesterday, I think it was, but it's still worth mentioning. It's worth us talking about it because it's important. Before I begin to dissect this issue, and I'm going to need about 15 minutes of your time, if not less. I'm reminded for those of you that remember back when the MMD first came into power, this was after 1991, there were many churches that were pro-MMD, and for obvious reasons. Chiluba stood on a platform of faith, Christianity, and it was through his administration that we consequently had a constitution that had enshrined in it our nation as a Christian nation. But what I found interesting about the 90s, I remember I was a college student. I came back from the States to visit home, and I was a guest at a church. I won't mention the church. If I told you the church, you'd probably know exactly which church it was. So I walk into this church, and, you know, somebody had invited me there. And I found it so strange that before the preacher gave his message, he had a copy of the Post newspaper. He would open the Post newspaper. He would read Fred Membe's editorials and then castigate Fred Membe for writing these editorials. And I remember sitting there thinking, we're in church. Why are we discussing politics and analyzing political articles in newspapers. I found it ridiculous. I found it preposterous. I found it foolish. I found it disingenuous. And yet there were Christians who felt it perfectly normal to stand behind a pulpit and dissect a political article in front of a congregation. And they would do this for 15, 20, 35, 40 minutes before they even got to the message of the cross, before they even got to the message of salvation, before they even got to the message of pulling you out of the mire clay and preaching hope to a desperate, dying world. These jokers would read from the Post newspaper. I remember thinking, this is crazy. I said all of that to say this. Clergymen, listen, clergymen, you that call yourselves pastors, preachers, you that are custodians of the faith, men and women of the cloth, yours is to be pro-Zambian and non-partisan. And I know it's difficult to do. Look, every one of us supports who we're going to support. I mean, it doesn't matter who you are or what occupation you're in, but especially the clergy. With the clergy, you have to be doubly certain. You have to be doubly careful. Because when you stand in front of that congregation, regardless of the congregation, your congregation comprises many different faiths. Many different political persuasions, many different political faiths. So for you to push a certain agenda in a certain direction as the leader of a church, knowing full well that your congregation has many different political persuasions, you are being unwise, you're being unfair, and you are being disingenuous. Now, there's nothing wrong with talking against injustice. There's nothing wrong with talking against the ills of society. There's nothing wrong with raising the issues of humanity. We're supposed to do that. Not only are you clergy, but you're human. But there's everything wrong when you are clearly and obviously partisan and you lean a certain direction, you lean towards a certain direction simply because of your proximity and your association with the previous regime. This Catholic priest, Salangetta, and this is what I find strange also. I have a problem. Let me digress here and say very quickly, I have a problem. If I can't find your digital footprint on social media or on the internet, if you do not have a binary number, that tells me something. I Googled this man, Salangetta. He's a human being, but there's hardly anything on the internet about him. There is no digital trace. The only thing he talks about on there, on his Facebook page, I think he studied in the UK. That's it. We know nothing else about him. And for leaders, any type of community leader, I don't care who you are, you have to have a traceable digital footprint. I've got to know who you are. You're not going to stand on a huge platform, especially on the platform of being a Catholic priest. If you call yourself a Catholic priest, I should be able to find out the basic information about who you are. But if I can't even find that, there's a problem somewhere. And this man is clearly, through no fault of his own, he's clearly aligned with the former regime. And that's fine. That's fine. But it's not fine to stand behind a pulpit and make it look like the current administration is not doing anything at all. If you listen to the tone of his voice when he talked about the graph, Guys, it's not what he said about the graph, it's how he said it. I want that to sink in. It's not what he said about the graph. I mean, that's his opinion. If he feels that the graph doesn't benefit the average Zambian, that's his view. It's a wrong view, but that's his view. It's the tone within which he said it. His tone was dismissive. His tone was clearly partisan. His tone was, in a sense, it was so disrespectful. He basically was saying, this president, this Hakainde Hichilema, he's wasting his time showing us graphs. It was his tone. Now, let's look at the graph for a moment. The graph was the president's attempt to quantify what he was talking about, to simply show you where they were, where they are, and where they're going. That's basically what it is. If you work for any company, you understand that those things are important. You need to know where you were, where you are, and where your vision is. For Father Salangeta to bring it down and to oversimplify it by saying, no, you graphite by him saying that, that is gutter politics. You're pandering to the gallery. You're pandering to the basic average citizen who may not understand the graph, and you know full well that he may not understand the graph, and so you take advantage of that ignorance. Are you hearing that? You take advantage of the basic Zambian's ignorance because you know good and hell well that lots of people, you know they don't understand the graph, but is it the president's fault when he says he wants to, when he tries, when he attempts to quantify his vision and say, this is where we were, this is where we are, and this is where we're going? For you to stand up in front of your congregation and say, that graph was inconsequential. That graph was just worthless. You are oversimplifying the matter, and you know it. And you are oversimplifying it for political expedience. That's not wise. That isn't wise. And I think that you are misguided. You don't know your position as a priest in the Catholic Church. Your role, your calling, your mandate is to preach the gospel to the uttermost parts of the earth. Your role is to go out there and compel them to come in. That's your role. That's your God-given mandate. But when you veer off, when you leave the beaten path and you go off and you wander off into the woods and you start talking about, oh no, this president, he's showing us a graph that the average Zambian doesn't even understand. He's showing us a graph that the average Zambian can't even conceptualize at the very basic level. You are oversimplifying the matter for political expedience, and you, as a Catholic priest, are wrong for doing so. It's the truth. It's true. It's true. Yeah. Thought I'd share that with you. Let me throw up a couple of comments. See if you guys agree or disagree. Because, you know, Facebook got it. TC says, I belong to the Catholic Church, and I totally agree. The church shouldn't be used for politics. The priest was totally wrong. Let the church be used for salvation and to give hope to broken souls. I agree. The preacher man was overexcited. He was. And this is what I found disturbing about the way he was talking. He sounded like a street kid. The way he was taught is, no, il faut te foyer, chite, il faut te foyer, wadi, il faut te fishiva. Salangetta sounded very ignorant. He did. He just sounded like he sounded like a bus conductor is what he did. He was. He sounded like a bus driver from Chawama and the Kwamisis. He didn't sound like a Catholic priest. He didn't sound like a man of the cloth. He didn't sound like a man that was full of the word of God and waiting to preach and bring in a lost and dying world. He didn't sound like that. He sounded like a vagabond. He sounded like a lumpen. That's what you sounded like. All right. Instead of preaching unity and reconciliation, he's doing the opposite. Now, guys, I agree with that, but let's be clear. We're not saying clergymen cannot speak to the ills of society. You're supposed to. But you're supposed to do it in such a manner that doesn't alienate you from members of your congregation. You can't be partisan. The key is you have to be pro-Zambian, non-partisan. That's very difficult to do as a clergyman in Zambia, especially in Zambia. I'm a Catholic priest, Nabo. Indeed, if you bashima people in general, I mean, if you're not just Catholics, not just Catholic, I'm a pastors. The spirit of Kuriamo is too much. So it's very difficult in this environment for these chaps who call themselves pastors to be pro-Zambian and non-partisan. Very difficult. It's like pulling teeth out, you know. All right. Priest Urutoshi, where is the message? Bread of life. Yeah. It's money he wants. Last comment. Oh, yes. What sort of a priest is he? Very unreasonable to preach like that. Yes. I didn't like that. I didn't like the fact that because, you know, I spend lots of time with bus conductors. I spend lots of time with bus drivers. That Catholic priest, Salangetta, sounded like a bus conductor. He did. And he shouldn't sound like that. He should sound like a man of God. He should sound like a man ready, willing, and able to preach the undying, the uncompromising, the unshakable word of God. That's what he should be doing, not that nonsense he was doing out there in church, in his church, in front of his congregation. And even though the congregation cheered, you must understand that there is a good number of his congregation that were displeased. Because not everybody in church is PF. Not everybody in church is UPND. Not everybody in church is MMD. You have to keep that in mind, you preachers, you Catholic priests. Keep that in mind when you stand in front of your congregations. Okay, that's what I wanted to share with you. Thank you so much for watching. Have a good day. Take care of yourselves and each other.